futuristic American society, all beauty, intelligence, and creativity is limited. When one boy dares to fight the oppressing standards, he shows what it truly means to be human. Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal due to the 211th Amendment to the Constitution and the vigilance of the United States Handicapper General. Nobody was stronger than anybody else. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. But some things weren't quite right. It was in April that the Handicapper General took Hazel and George Bergeron's son Harrison away from them. Now, it was very tragic, but they couldn't think very hard about it. You see, Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant that she could not think about anything at all, except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, he was required to wear a government transmitter in his ear. Now, every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. Now, George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's face, but she'd forgotten what they were about. There were ballerinas on the television. They weren't very good. You see, they were burdened by sash weights, and their faces were masked, so that no one, seeing a free, graceful gesture or a pretty face, would feel like something the cat drug in. Feel like something the cat drug in. Suddenly, the television program was interrupted by a news bulletin. Harrison Bergeron, age 14, has escaped from jail, where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is regarded as extremely dangerous. A photograph of Harrison filled the screen. He wore a tremendous pair of headphones to deafen him, and scrap metal harnessed his body. My God, it's Harrison, said George Bergeron. But the realization was blasted from his mind immediately by the sound in his ear. Suddenly, a shrieking noise came from the television. It sounded like a door being torn from its hinges. When George could open his eyes again, a living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. He wore the same headphones that he was pictured in. Even as I stand here, crippled and sickened, I am a greater leader than the world has ever known. Now watch what I, Harrison Bergeron, can become. He tore the harness like paper and smashed his deafening headphones like a man who would have awed Thor, the god of thunder. But the first woman who dare rise, claim herself as my empress. A moment passed, and the ballerina with the most hideous mask arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, and last of all, removed the mask from her face. She was blindingly beautiful. Now, shall we show them the true meaning of the word dance? Music! And then, the musicians scrambled back to their spots, and they began to play. Harrison put his hands on the girl's tiny waist, and with an explosion of joy and grace into the air they sprung. Not only were the laws of the land abandoned, but the laws of motion and gravity as well. They leapt like deer on the moon. And then, with love and pure will, they remained suspended in the air and kissed. But it was then the handicapper general herself burst into the studio. And the emperor and his empress were dead before they hit the ground. You have 10 seconds to get your handicaps back on! And everyone in the studio put their handicaps back on. It was then that the television set in the Bergeron home burned out. George said, "You've been crying about something? What are you crying about?"
I forget. Something real sad on the television.
Well, forget sad things. I always do. The thought of her son lingered in Hazel's mind only for a moment before her thoughts scattered again.